On today's news, a huge return for WrestleMania 37.
Various wrestlers respond to The Undertaker's locker room comments.
Backstage update on Drew McIntyre.
And WWE have made a decision regarding the COVID-19 vaccine.
Are you ready? Are you ready for the news time? Yes, welcome to the Saturday News. My name is Phil Chambers and I am joined by Gareth Morgan for all of today's wrestling news. But before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment down below what you think of all of today's stories, and click the links in the description for timestamps to each individual story. But first up, we've got some huge news on WrestleMania 37. Now, this is coming from WrestleVotes on Twitter, and I'm just going to read out the tweet because it kind of goes through everything. They say, once a decision was made to run the two-night card for WrestleMania, the creative team started working on bigger ideas. The thought is WWE now needs 4 major matches, 2 per show. That probably requires outside assistance from big names. Cena and Goldberg nearly locks. Rock unlikely. Taker to be declared. And then they have a little follow-up on the Undertaker one, just saying that the majority of those backstage think he's done, and rightfully so. However, it only takes one call from one usually convincing, get it, man, to change all that. Now, going through this, names for WrestleMania, obviously we knew they were going to bring back some big ones. They've got Goldberg at the Royal Rumble already, so it kind of makes sense to continue him on to WrestleMania 37. But John Cena, we haven't seen obviously in the ring since the Firefly Funhouse last year. Now, he was in a promotional package on Raw for WrestleMania 37, so that might be hinting at bringing him back for it. But I'm all game for bringing Cena back for the big one. It's over a big 2-night event. Hopefully they can get a good match out of him. And the Undertaker one, yeah, I'd take that one more with a pinch of WrestleVotes. That just seems a bit more like speculation than anything else. He has said, obviously, that he's done with wrestling, but he's also said that, like, if Vince ever needs him, he's there for him. And yeah, they're right. Vince McMahon could turn around and say, hey, Undertaker, fancy coming back for one more. But would they bother when they're in a stadium that they're getting fans back for, but it's only going to be sort of a maximum of 30,000 fans? And they've announced that WrestleMania is going to be in Texas next year for WrestleMania 38. So surely if you're going to bring back The Undertaker for one more big match in front of fans, you're going to do it in his home state. You're going to get him into the Hall of Fame at the same time, and it's going to be a big hometown comeback greatness for the Undertaker. And then, yeah, you push that as the big selling point of next year's WrestleMania when you've got like 90,000 fans in that stadium. But yeah, some interesting news with Cena and Goldberg.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of people I really do want to see come back for WrestleMania, I think Cena's probably right near the top of that list in terms of people that can still go but still have that star power. Do you know what I mean? Because like people like Goldberg, they kind of come back, just smash through people, just pull off the few moves that they can do and then get out. Undertaker, it's been very similar towards the end of his career, whereas Cena, you still feel like he's got enough left in the tank where he can put somebody over but doing it in a decent enough match, like similarly to, ironically, to what The Rock did with Cena. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like they've still got the physical prowess, they still look the part, they can do a decent enough job. I mean, when they do talk about having 2 marquee matches per night, yeah, that's great, because obviously they had that's similar to what they had last year, but why don't you just build up people within your own product to put in those marquee matches? Do you know what I mean? Like you got your Roman Reigns, you got your Daniel Bryan, people like Cesaro now recently going on a decent enough run and everything else. Like there are people there that you could mold and push to be in these big marquee matches. And I'd really like in one of these big marquee matches for WrestleMania this year, if it does go down like this, to have like an all women's match in one of these marquee matches. Like bring Rousey back and have her against Bianca Belair or something. Just something a little bit different. Have some cinematic matches if we must do that and go down that route again. But I think that there's scope here, it being a surreal situation still, just to do stuff outside the norm and just keep breaking down barriers. So fingers crossed that happens. But in regards to The Undertaker, obviously he's one of those people that are rumoured to be coming back in one of these big 4 matches for WrestleMania. He had some comments very recently on the Joe Rogan Experience that have hit a few nerves, let's say, in the wrestling community right now, because he was talking obviously about it being quite tough for him, he said, right now to watch the product, because he said that the product's changed so much and it's kind of soft is what he described it as. He said, I'll probably piss a lot of people off by saying that, but they need to hear it. It is what it is. And he also commented about people playing video games and making themselves look pretty, and he said that's an evolution, but it was just a bit strange to him compared to the other eras in wrestling, which all right, cool, that's your opinion, Taker, but it isn't something that's shared with the current crop of wrestlers at this point, because Drew McIntyre came out, he said, I don't agree whatsoever, especially from an in-ring perspective when he was talking about the product being soft right now. He said, I've listened to part of it, I've got to listen to the whole thing, obviously, because it's pretty new, but I think he may have been referring to like storylines and characters, etc., things like that. Obviously, the Attitude Era had its own dynamic and everything else. He said back in the day they were more sexual based, more like risque, 18 plus, and he said the current product we've got now is PG, and there's only so far we can push it, and we're willing to push it, like in those kind of parameters. But he said there's certain things from back in the day that were awesome and certain things that were not awesome that he wouldn't want to go back to, and he makes a valid point there. A lot of things, if you look at the Attitude Era through today's lens, quite horrific. So I kind of agree with Mr. McIntyre there, I'll be honest. Xavier Woods also came out and commented on these comments. He said, I wouldn't be the person that I am today without the guidance and lessons of a few key people from the previous generation of wrestling. They taught me about the business to save my money, and that having video games in the locker room is healthier than having, and then the comment he put at the end of that was redacted. So he said, thank you guys. And that, I think that's quite a kind of polite way of saying thank you, Taker. I respect everything that you guys and the generation above me have taught me. Some people even said, use video games instead of drugs, and I subscribe to that. So a very respectable way of responding there from Xavier Woods. Also, Aiden English, of all people, he responded on Twitter. He said, I understand where someone from his era and time thinks this. Nothing but the utmost respect. However, in the 2020s, I think it's amazing. It's a lot of fun and camaraderie for the locker room. Would you rather we do drugs? So, for two very different ways of kind of approaching the same point of view there. And then AEW's Trent just came out, and he was kind of responding to a tweet that said, required listening for wrestlers, and played wrestlers in regards to that Joe Rogan Experience podcast. And he just said, bad take, The Undertaker needs to be put in jail. So that's Trent's opinion. So I think this is something Taker admitted in the podcast. So it's going to rub a few people up the wrong way. He thinks it's something that they need to hear at this moment in time. I mean, I don't necessarily agree at all, because whatever helps combine and kind of bring a locker room together. If it is video games, if it is making sure they look the part before a match, great, you do you. It's helping produce some pretty decent in-ring action for the most part. So I've got no problem with that, and I think it's just Taker maybe holding on to the past with all he's got. Yeah, definitely. I think, glorifying the old days. But it's like, when you talk about the in-ring style being a bit softer than it was, like, of course, they're not smacking each other over the head with chairs anymore, for obvious reasons. But I think, like, the actual in-ring physicality of it is way stronger than it ever was back then, like with the infiltration of strong style and the kind of indie style. And then, like, if you watch, like, Daniel Bryan versus Cesaro from the other week, they slap the buggery out of each other, and they do not hold back with things like that. So, like, in a way, and the pace of the matches, the sort of high flying nature of it and things, and the that is like way more than they ever attempted in the Attitude Era. They're just not using weapons to smack each other over the head, which I think is probably a good progression, really. But in terms of backstage, like, Stone Cold's mentioned this before about like the cutthroat nature of the locker room of people like desperately trying to one-up each other and get ahead, led to bigger stars because they push each other to go further and get higher and like reach for that brass ring that they always talk about. Whereas now, with it being more of a camaraderie in the backstage area and the friendship, they don't want to like step over each other to get higher, so no one has managed to get higher. So, like, I guess, that is one way of looking at it, but in terms of just having a happy life and like surely being friends with people and playing video games backstage is much more conducive to just having a nice life and being happy than stepping over each other and kicking the crap out of yourself to the point where you do have to go to things like drugs and things. So yeah, it's definitely different ways of looking at it, but I'm kind of personally glad that it's evolved this far. Yeah, you're not the only one. Just if that is what makes you happy, then you do you. Exactly. But speaking of Drew McIntyre, there was a few worries that he was not going to be back in ring in time for this superstar spectacle that's happening on Tuesday that was filming yesterday, I think. Obviously 2 weeks ago he tested positive for the global bastard, and there was fears that he wouldn't be back in time, but he did return yesterday for the main event, so he will be there for the superstar spectacle, and they are pushing him big time for Raw next week, as he's going to be going face to face with Goldberg in the
go-home show for the Royal Rumble. So Drew McIntyre is back in the ring. We can see him next week on Raw on the Superstar Spectacle, and he'll definitely be ready in time for the Royal Rumble.
And that's great to hear. I mean, when McIntyre did suddenly go down with it a couple of weeks ago, I think most of the internet wrestling community were just a bit in shock of it. We thought, oh my God, it's gone straight for the top guy. Nobody's safe. And like, that is the harsh reality of this current situation that we are facing. It isn't prejudice. It's just it can affect everyone, really, at any moment. So McIntyre's kind of gone out of his way to just promote using a mask and everything else. And it's just great to see that he's now fully fit, well, as fit as he can be at this moment in time. And he's back on the mend, and he'll be taking on the big Goldberg, the big bald baddie. And speaking of obviously the current global bastard and everything else, WWE have now officially kind of set their stall out in terms of what they're going to be doing with the vaccine going forward, obviously, because that is something that a lot of companies are offering to the staff. Obviously, over here in the UK, it's been rolled out quite well at this moment in time. And Fightful Select are reporting, they are stating now that WWE said that they have, they've told the talent that they will not be receiving any COVID-19 vaccines through the company. So no real shock twist there. WWE being the bearers of all bad news yet again. The news was broken to talent via the WWE Talent Relations app. So I'm guessing Johnny Ace's voice just rings out every time you click on something. Okay, guys, here's what's going on.
I'd love to have access to that app for a day and just see the kind of thing that comes through that.
I'd love it. But if anyone knows how we can get access to that just for a day, it'd just be so much content. It'd be great. And Fightful also added that several wrestlers were caught a little bit off guard by this news, but then a few others weren't really caught off guard, because this is another real example of the famed individual contractor status being put into effect, really. Yeah. I mean, the WWE isn't necessarily tied to having to provide anybody with a vaccine or anything else like that. It also mentions a few other people produced positive COVID tests after Drew McIntyre tested positive a couple of weeks ago. So it's still very much prevalent, this thing, which is affecting the entire planet. We're currently in lockdown 3.0 right now, which still means we're sat in bedrooms with blue screens doing our thing. So just stay safe and just stay indoors this time, because it's nothing. I know I'm laughing now. It's more of a kind of terrified laughter, but it is nothing to laugh at.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a mental decision. Absolutely. They've had issues with this before. Obviously, they've had numerous mini outbreaks throughout the past year, and now they almost had their top champion on Raw taken out for the Royal Rumble, one of their biggest shows of the year, when they've got such an easy out for this. It's just to vaccinate everyone and get it sorted, and then you can do whatever you want, because in a safe, much safer environment that will not lead to these big things and people going missing from TV randomly and not explaining anything. I think Drew McIntyre is one of the very few people who've actually come out and said that they've had it, and I think probably because they had to explain why their main champion was going to be off TV for a few weeks. But it's just such an easy out. Just get it done, and you'll save yourself probably loads of money in the long run. I don't understand it. It's stupid. Let's move on to some Twitter questions before we just start moaning about WWE. The first one comes from Mr. Spiffy, who says, "Happy Saturday, guys. Daniel Bryan kept mentioning challenging the champion of choice last night at SmackDown, obviously. What do you think if Bryan won the Royal Rumble and challenged Finn Balor for the NXT Championship instead of Roman Reigns?"
Oh, I thought he was going to go down the McIntyre route then, because much of this conversation is kind of centered around him, but that is interesting. Oh, Daniel Bryan in NXT for a little bit, as somebody who kind of reviews it weekly would... it'd just give me a new lease on life. And think of the matches. Just think, even if they just had a 20-minute banger, throw it on WrestleMania, open the event with it, and it'd just be... Oh, it'd be terrific, wouldn't it? Just think of that match.
It would be an absolutely incredible match and a huge showcase for NXT. But I don't think they'll ever go down that route, unfortunately. If he did win, I think you've got to do the Roman Reigns match. It's got the most logical story behind it. As much as that match would be absolutely incredible, giving Finn and Bryan 20 minutes on a WrestleMania to fight over the NXT title. It'd just be absolutely incredible. But yeah, I don't see it happening at all. But it would be great. And the next question comes from Samson Cho, who says, "What do you think of Brock returning at the Royal Rumble, winning it to face Roman at Mania, and then Heyman sticking with Roman against a face Brock? Then at Mania, Heyman turns on Roman Reigns and get a face Heyman with a face Brock going forwards."
There was a lot to unpack there. So Reigns...
So Brock returns, faces Roman Reigns at Mania, but Heyman stays with Roman up until Mania, and then he turns on Heyman, doing the old sort of Big Show swerve.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I mean, if you had Lesnar against Reigns just in general, that's gonna... We said this last week, just looking at that match now compared to what it was like 2 years ago. Two different people, and the fact that Lesnar would be baby-faced in this rivalry at this point is just insane. It's just another example of how 2021 is going to be just as, well, if not weirder than 2020, really. So I'd be into that because it'd just be physical and intense and crazy, and if you had that big swerve in it in the middle or near the end, that'd be great drama as well. So I'd love this, but I'd probably, just kind of alluding to that question before that, I'd probably still would prefer the Daniel Bryan Roman Reigns match, I'll be honest.
Yeah, but I mean, it's definitely, like we were talking earlier, they wanted those 4 marquee matches. This would definitely be one of them, and it would be amazing. Story-wise, I don't know about the Heyman part, just because they have done it before with the Big Show when he was siding with him and then swerved. So it's kind of a repeat of that, but it would. I mean, as a match, Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar now, like you say, with this new Roman Reigns against the face Brock, a completely different dynamic. Roman Reigns is a completely different superstar to what he was the last time he faced Brock Lesnar, so I would be down with that. And the final question of the day comes from someone who I've not written down their Twitter handle. I'll find out while you're answering it. But they say, with rumors of John Cena being back for WrestleMania, who do you want him to face? I say one final showdown with Orton.
Why? No, you've got so many. Edge is right there.
Well, that's the likely one for Orton, isn't it? The third match of the trilogy.
That'd be.
Edge finally beats Randy Orton at Mania.
Well, no, I'd like Edge and John Cena.
Oh, Edge and John Cena, not Edge and Orton.
There you go. There's a swerve.
I'd rather have Edge and John Cena as well, to be fair.
I'd love to retread that, just because we kind of hinted at, like, not last year, WrestleMania 35, of potentially having like a reigniting of the Kurt Angle John Cena feud, and that never happened, and it was a bit kind of heartbreaking. If we just had a little flicker of the Edge John Cena stuff from all those years ago, they could still bring it. I'm not sure who would be the heel in that dynamic necessarily, whether they'd need that if they just have him as a showcase, but just as an out there pick, I'd like to see John Cena against Edge.
Fair. I don't know, really. I probably should have thought about this before I asked the question, but I was thinking like Drew McIntyre in my head for some reason, just because I think it's something that we haven't really seen before, and you don't really need to you could do a face versus face thing for it, of just a battle of who is the top star these days, like if Drew McIntyre surpassing John Cena as that top star, like a passing of the torch kind of moment. I'd be kind of down with that.
Yeah, there is that.
So long as Cena doesn't win, obviously.
No, Cena needs to win so he can break the world title record, Phil. That's what needs to happen.
Stop it. That question came from Matt Hope, so thank you for that on Twitter. But that was today's news. Thank you very much for joining us. Like I say, subscribe to the channel, comment down below what you think of all of today's stories. If you want, you can follow us on Twitter to ask more questions. You can follow me at PhilMyChambers, and you can follow Gareth
at GMorgan04.
And you can follow everyone at WhatCulture, at WhatCulture WWE. Thank you so much for watching, and have yourselves a bloody good day.